Since Princess Diana passed away, speculation surrounding Prince Harry has never ceased. From the pony walking silently behind his mother's coffin to the royal young man who dared to leave the palace to live a different life, Harry has always been the focal point of curiosity, controversy, and even doubt. Every step he takes is tied to the shadow of a monarchy striving to balance tradition and change. And then, after a series of events from the bombshell interview, public criticisms, to the cold silence of the palace, finally, King Charles has officially spoken. After months of avoidance and maintaining a calm exterior, the king has broken his silence to address the discord with his second son. The words he spoke were not easy to hear, but they could not be ignored. Could this be the first step toward reconciliation? Or is it a sign that the father-son relationship has truly fractured? Join us as we explore what is truly happening between the monarch and Prince Harry, the one once filled with expectations, now facing the royal family as a stranger. More than 4 years have passed since Prince Harry and Meghan Markle made the bold decision to step away from their senior royal roles. Back in January 2020, they shocked the world by abandoning the official duties that came with their royal status. They left behind the centuries-old customs of the British monarchy and began a new life in California. Palm trees replaced palace walls, and soon their days were filled with podcast recordings, streaming deals, and a different kind of spotlight. It was not just a change of scenery, it was a major shift in identity. Since then, almost every move Harry and Meghan have made has stirred more tension and widened the growing gap between them and the rest of the royal family. Their public appearances, interviews, and media projects have only added fuel to a fire that started burning long before they officially stepped away. While their actions have earned both admiration and criticism, the divide between them and the monarchy has grown colder with time. Yet, despite the explosive moments, including Harry's candid memoir and their headline-making interview with Oprah, the couple still officially holds the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Some might find it strange. After all, they abandoned royal life. They were no longer royal in the traditional sense, but they still retained the titles that once defined their place in the monarchy. That decision to leave caused controversy within the royal family and beyond. But those titles remain in place, and the reason why is more complex than it appears. Behind the scenes at Buckingham Palace, King Charles III seems to be playing a very calculated game. Now in his late 70s and still relatively new to the throne, the king is said to be cautious about making any bold moves that could deepen the cracks in the royal image. His approach is shaped not by emotion, but by strategy. According to palace insiders, Charles is deliberately avoiding any direct action against Harry and Meghan's titles. But it's not because he feels forgiving. On the contrary, he's trying to avoid triggering another public crisis. He understands that removing their titles would spark a media storm. The public reaction could easily turn against him, portraying him as a father punishing his own son on a global stage. In the eyes of many, that would do far more harm than good to the image of the crown. So, instead of making a loud, clear-cut decision, he's doing the opposite. He stays silent, keeps the titles in place, and lets the silence speak for itself. This is a gentle warning, a way to maintain control without wielding an iron fist. This quiet strategy does not mean there is a path to reconciliation. In fact, the tension behind palace doors remains very real. Emotions are high, and relationships have grown more strained with each passing year. The initial hope, especially from Harry's side, was for a middle ground. He had imagined a scenario where he and Meghan could continue to serve the crown while also exploring their own opportunities across the Atlantic. But that idea did not fit within the rigid framework of royal life. The British monarchy does not operate in half measures. You are either a working royal or you are not. There is no room for a hybrid role. King Charles, guided by years of watching his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, rule with discipline, believed in maintaining clear boundaries. Blurred lines would only bring confusion and public scrutiny, especially when it came to matters like funding and official duties. While the monarchy was determined to preserve tradition, Harry and Meghan were moving in a completely different direction, Their focus shifted to freedom, speaking their truth, and raising their children in a more private and flexible environment. When they shared their story on national television in 2021, they did not hold back. Their emotional experiences and the challenges they faced within the institution reached millions. For some, it was a moment of validation. For others, it was seen as a betrayal. But regardless of the opinion, the impact was undeniable. Their words left a mark that the monarchy could not ignore. Even later, by when Harry spoke about possibly giving up the titles in 2023, the situation did not change. Titles like Duke and Duchess are deeply rooted in royal law and tradition. They cannot be handed back like a borrowed item. Removing them requires action from the very institution Harry and Meghan left behind. And so the titles remain. The decision is not in Harry's hands. It is in the king's. Charles, mindful of every detail, seems to believe that doing nothing is better than making the wrong move. For now, he has chosen silence over confrontation. But that does not mean all is calm. Harry and Meghan continue to live far from royal life, yet their titles keep them tied to it. They are still the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, even as they build a future separate from the world they left behind. But nothing about their current status feels final. Everything could change in an instant. And behind the palace gates, there is a sense that change may still come. The silence from the crown is not peace. It is simply a pause. Something is building, and when it breaks, the world will be watching once again. King Charles's ongoing feud with Prince Harry. Well, so for a start, the only time I've come back to the UK is sadly for funerals or court cases. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex still carry their royal titles, but the meaning behind those titles has changed. Since they stepped back from royal duties in 2020, the distance between Prince Harry and his family has gradually turned into something much deeper and more painful. What began as a physical move across the ocean has grown into an emotional separation that seems harder to mend with each passing year. Silence has replaced connection, and misunderstanding has replaced trust. In 2023, Harry released his memoir, Spare, and with it, he revealed more of his inner world than ever before. The book spoke of loneliness and feeling unwanted, even within his own family. It became clear that his pain went beyond recent events. It stretched back years. He described feeling abandoned, disconnected, both physically and emotionally. There was sadness in his words, but also anger and deep disappointment, especially when it came to his father and his brother. At the same time, some saw Harry's decision to speak out as an act of betrayal. They felt that by sharing personal details about the royal family, he had crossed a line. While he often said he felt betrayed by others, critics pointed out that he was doing something similar by going public. Yet Harry insisted he was trying to protect his wife and children, building a safer life far away in California. But the peace he sought was not easy to find, and the tension around him continued to grow. Meghan Markle quickly became a figure of controversy. For some, she brought something fresh and hopeful to the royal family. She was modern, confident, and open, unafraid to speak her mind. But others, especially many voices in the British media, painted a different picture. They said she was breaking the unspoken rules of royal life. They blamed her for changing Harry and for putting pressure on his bond with William. Every move she made was scrutinized. Every word was picked apart, and the negative attention only grew stronger. Some stories claimed Meghan struggled with royal traditions. Her habit of hugging people and showing emotion was said to clash with the quiet, formal ways of the palace. Some anonymous sources described her as difficult or even controlling. Others said she believed she could change the system from within. Whether these claims were true or not, they created a storm around her image. To many, Meghan became more than just a person. She became a symbol of change and progress. To others, she represented disruption and trouble. As the couple continued to give interviews and appear in public, the relationship between Harry and his father became more strained. Behind the scenes, this quiet struggle has begun to change the way the royal family functions. Phone calls became fewer, And when they happened, they were often short and tense. Insiders said King Charles felt hurt and confused. He didn't understand why private family matters were being shared with the world. He had hoped the situation would calm down, but instead, it kept getting worse. The connection between Harry's children and the rest of the royal family was also very limited. Archie and Lilibet were rarely in the United Kingdom, and when they did visit, their stays were brief and filled with disagreements over things like security and schedules. Some said King Charles wished he could see his grandchildren more often, but didn't know how to do so without causing more trouble. Others believed he no longer trusted the couple, especially Meghan, whose work outside the royal family seemed to challenge the crown in new ways. Harry also accused his father of cutting him off financially, which added more tension to their relationship. Meanwhile, Meghan continued building her own path with podcasts, projects, and public appearances. Each time she stepped into the spotlight, rumors swirled about what she might say or reveal next. The uncertainty made the royal family uneasy. King Charles, in particular, began to draw clearer boundaries. One key moment came in September 2022, when Queen Elizabeth was nearing her end. King Charles made a decision that signaled Meghan's standing within the royal family. That decision sent a message. It was no longer just about being polite or keeping up appearances. The king had begun to protect the crown in a new way by setting limits, even with his own son. Inside the palace, people began to sense a change. The late queen had always believed in keeping the family together, no matter what. But Charles was different. With each new controversy, his patience seemed to grow thinner. As he faced personal health challenges and took on the heavy role of monarch, he began to prepare for something far more decisive. There were quiet talks behind the scenes. Some believed Charles was preparing to make a move that his mother would never have made, a decision that could change everything. It would not only affect Meghan, it could also reshape Harry's future. And this time, there might be no way back. Meghan Markle takes a hit. The distance between Prince Harry and the rest of the royal family had been growing gradually for years. But by late 2022, it was no longer just an illusion. It had become very real. The decisions made around Queen Elizabeth II's final hours made that clear. What should have been a private, deeply personal time of family grief instead revealed a quiet but powerful shift that would define the royal family's new era. On September 8, 2022, Queen Elizabeth passed away at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. This moment marked the end of a long reign, but it also began something else. It marked the start of King Charles III's leadership and the choices he would make moving forward. One of his first major decisions was deeply personal and involved his youngest son. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle happened to be in the United Kingdom at the time, attending public events. When news spread that the Queen's health had taken a serious turn, many thought the couple would head to Balmoral together. But behind closed doors, a very different plan was forming. Multiple reports later confirmed that King Charles had made a private request. Meghan was not to accompany Harry. While some suggested it was for practical reasons, citing that Catherine, Princess of Wales, was also staying behind to care for her children. Others believed the two situations were not really the same. Kate's decision to stay behind seemed voluntary. Meghan, however, was specifically asked to come. Harry, already carrying years of emotional strain, was shocked by this request. He spoke about the moment in his memoir, released a few months later, explaining how hurt and confused he had been. The phone call with his father was short and to the point. Meghan would not be joining him. Harry argued. He wanted his wife treated with dignity, but in the end he agreed, only because he was told Kate would also remain behind. Still, this was not just about who went and who stayed for Harry. It was another reminder that things had changed. His place in the family was no longer what it used to be. He traveled to Balmoral alone, in a hurry, hoping to get there in time. But he arrived too late. The Queen had already passed. Unlike other family members, Charles, Camilla, Anne, Harry had no special transport waiting for him. There were no instructions, no one to meet him. He didn't receive the news from a relative, but through a message on his phone after landing. That moment stayed with him. He walked into Balmoral as an outsider, not just in terms of logistics, but in spirit. The Queen had always been the family's steady center. Even when things were tense, she had kept everyone in place. But now she was gone, and her absence gave way to a new dynamic, where old tensions surfaced and new boundaries were drawn. Charles, now king, had stepped into a role where every decision carried weight. His handling of Meghan's absence was quiet but meaningful. The day passed with a noticeable difference. There were fewer media distractions and less public drama. The mood was calmer, the morning more focused. It became clear that, at least for that day, the family could grieve without added tension. This experience may have influenced how Charles viewed the future. Meghan had become a figure the press couldn't leave alone. Her presence, no matter the setting, always drew attention. And for a royal family so focused on tradition, image, and privacy, that attention could feel like a threat. Inside the palace walls, the atmosphere grew more cautious. There was a quiet shift toward control, toward minimizing risk. Meghan's appearances, business projects, and public interviews had already stirred mixed feelings. Allowing her to be present at such a historically and emotionally charged moment might have been seen as too unpredictable. Each time she appeared, it sparked endless debates, articles, and speculation. Meanwhile, Harry was stuck between two worlds. His devotion to Meghan was clear and unwavering, but his connection to his royal roots was growing weaker with each passing month. Balmoral was not just a place for him. It became a symbol of a truth he had been avoiding. The idea that his ties to the institution were fading away for good. Standing alone at Balmoral, he seemed to finally realize that the life he once knew, the family he once believed would always be there, had moved on without him. Meghan remained silent throughout it all. She gave no interviews, issued no statements, and said nothing about being left behind. But her silence spoke volumes. It suggested that the experience had cut deeply, and perhaps there was nothing more to say. No need to defend or explain. The message was already clear. For those watching from the outside, the picture had changed. Meghan's role in the royal family, already unstable, now seemed to be over in every meaningful way. This moment, wrapped in sadness and silence, marked a final turning point, a royal goodbye, not only to a beloved queen, but also to the idea of unity. And from that day forward, nothing would ever be quite the same, stuck in the dark. After Queen Elizabeth II's passing at Balmoral, something quietly shifted behind the grandeur of the royal family. King Charles, no longer just a son, but now the monarch, began shaping a new version of the monarchy, one with clearly drawn boundaries, some of which would never be crossed again. On the surface, everything was done with grace and formality. But Meghan Markle's absence during that deeply significant time was not just about protocol. It signaled a decision that would echo far beyond the walls of Balmoral Castle. What began as a courteous exemption gradually revealed itself as a lasting message. Meghan's exclusion, though veiled in royal politeness, was a deliberate choice. It was not just a moment in time, but the beginning of a firm new standard. With each passing day, what once looked like a small family decision began to feel more like a defining rule of King Charles's reign. The monarchy, long centered on tradition and unity, was now adapting to preserve itself, even if that meant creating distance within the family. Within the royal family, the atmosphere was far from peaceful. The image of unity projected by press offices stood in stark contrast to the quiet but steady tension growing behind closed doors. Palace aides and longtime royal observers noticed how strained the relationship had become, especially between Charles, Prince Harry, and Meghan. The tensions that first emerged during Megxit in 2020 did not fade away. Instead, they grew deeper, heavier, and harder to resolve. For King Charles, the issue was no longer just about roles or responsibilities. Meghan had come to represent something much larger, something the monarchy was not ready for: her way of speaking out, Her open interviews and her presence in high-profile media projects caused unease in the palace. Her actions were seen not just as bold, but as disruptive. In a world where silence and control were seen as pillars of royal strength, Meghan's independence looked like a challenge to the very core of what the monarchy stood for. Her presence came with risks the royals were not accustomed to. Every interview had the potential to bring private moments into the public spotlight. Every word spoken could be twisted into headlines. Her style of openness clashed directly with the careful silence the royal family had protected for generations. Meghan was not afraid to be honest, even if it meant stirring public conversation. That made her a figure of both admiration and concern. To King Charles and his advisors, she seemed like someone who could not be managed by royal traditions. Even when the family tried to come together, the emotional distance was impossible to ignore. Meghan's name often became a symbol of larger issues that no one wanted to voice aloud. Behind polite conversations and staged appearances, hurt feelings and broken trust were piling up. Charles, despite his affection for Harry, could not move past what he saw as Meghan's role in pulling his son away from royal life. Instead of looking too deeply into what had gone wrong within the family itself, it was easier for the king to believe Meghan had led Harry astray. Meanwhile, Harry found himself caught between two lives. On one hand, he was a husband and father who wanted to protect his children from the harsh spotlight that had followed him his entire life. On the other, he was still a son longing to be close to his family again. He reportedly tried to rebuild bridges, especially as concerns about his father's health emerged. But these efforts rarely received the welcome he hoped for. Messages often went unanswered, and invitations were entirely absent. This cold response began to weigh on Harry. He began to feel as though his entire family, his wife, and his children were being kept at a distance they could never cross. The unspoken message grew louder with time. Meghan's presence was unwelcome. In early 2024, quiet conversations began to suggest something even more painful. If the day came when King Charles was honored with a state funeral, Meghan would not be invited. And this was not a sudden decision. For the king, this decision may have felt like the only way to protect the monarchy's image and future. But for Harry, it marked another moment of rejection, one that confirmed everything he feared. The door was not just closed, it was being locked behind him and his wife. This growing divide showed a monarchy trying to survive by pulling inward, choosing control over reconciliation. And for those watching from the outside, it revealed a royal family still shaped by duty and image, but no longer able to hide the very human heartbreak behind its traditions. King Charles's final decision. Prince William's stance in the ongoing royal tension was never explicitly stated in public. But to those who followed closely, his loyalty seemed obvious. As the new Prince of Wales, he was expected to carry the image of calm and control, and that is exactly what he did. Quietly, firmly, he appeared to side with his father, King Charles III. The departure of Prince Harry, once his closest companion in royal life, had left a clear emotional wound. Their relationship, already fragile, grew even more strained with the arrival of Meghan Markle. Her presence added to the conflict and made healing feel further out of reach. I was born into those risks, and they have only increased over time, along with my marriage to Meghan. Those small moments of tension began to form deep cracks. Meghan, seen by many within the institution as an outsider, became the unspoken reason behind the growing distance between the siblings. She did not just bring change. She brought disruption to a system that relied on tradition and predictability. And for a family that always acted with quiet calculation, she represented unpredictability. For some, she became the easiest person to blame when choosing between repairing the family or protecting the crown. Inside the palace walls, decisions were made quietly. Conversations held in private corners began to shape what was to come. While the public knew little, whispers had already begun to circulate. The king's health and age meant that preparations for the future, even those surrounding his passing, were already being discussed in private settings. And within those serious discussions, A specific decision caused unease. Meghan Markle was to be excluded from all official events related to King Charles III's funeral. This was not a rumor. It was a firm directive, deliberately included in the documents outlining the king's final wishes. The language used was clear. The desire was to protect the dignity and seriousness of the funeral. As soon as the information began to surface, it caused confusion among both the press and the public. It was no longer just a matter of tradition or protocol. It was personal and reflected the emotional wounds that had been silently endured for years. Those who had witnessed the events of Balmoral and Poitou still remembered the tension. That was the day Meghan was asked not to come as Queen Elizabeth II neared her passing. It had been a painful time, but it also became a turning point. That decision stayed with the family, especially with King Charles, and it was clear now that he did not want history to repeat itself. What began as a simple rift between family members gradually turned into something much heavier. This was not about pushing someone out of a family gathering. It was a planned and carefully considered move. The king wanted his funeral to remain focused on remembrance, tradition, and unity. He feared that Meghan's presence would divert attention and create unnecessary drama. He wanted peace, at least in the final moment of his life's chapter, and he was determined to ensure it. Insiders confirmed that there was a legal framework that allowed such wishes to be enforced, whether through a will or a royal directive. The question many asked was, why only Meghan? Why not Harry? He had stepped away from royal duties, published a memoir, and spoken in interviews that reached across the globe. Yet, despite all that, the monarchy made a different calculation. Harry was still the king's son. He was born into royalty, and no matter what had happened, he remained tied to the monarchy in a way Meghan never could be. His children also held royal titles and a place in the line of succession. Completely excluding Harry from the funeral might have caused more trouble than allowing him to attend. Meghan's situation was different. She held no royal role, no official duty, and, in the eyes of the institution, no reason to be involved in a state event as significant as a sovereign's funeral. Her attendance might shift the focus away from the king's legacy. Royal advisors feared that instead of unity, there would be controversy. Headlines would focus on Meghan rather than the monarch. Debates would follow. It would no longer be a solemn moment, but a flashpoint for renewed division. For Harry, the pain is likely profound. He is caught between the love he still feels for his father and the loyalty he holds for his wife. The thought of walking behind his father's coffin without Meghan by his side might feel all too familiar, bringing back memories of Balmoral and the loneliness that came with it. He may struggle with this decision. Some believe he might choose to stay away, unwilling to be separated from Meghan at such a time. Others think he will attend out of respect and a sense of duty, even if the experience is painful. Either way, the public will be watching. His every move will be analyzed. His choice, whether he is there or not, will add another chapter to the story of a royal family that has been tested time and again. And so, even in the quiet planning of a royal funeral, the emotional drama continues. What should have been a private moment of grief now stands as another mirror reflecting years of unresolved pain, strained loyalties, and a family still struggling to find its way. No child truly wants to leave their family, to live in exile in a foreign land. Perhaps what Prince Harry has experienced is not simply disagreement or conflict, but a long journey filled with interwoven pain, expectations, and disappointment. Behind the public smiles and firm statements, there may be a son still quietly longing to be understood, to be called by his rightful name in his father's heart once more. And King Charles, though wearing a crown on his head, is also a father. Perhaps he, too, has spent many nights wondering, is there still enough time to heal, to call his son back? What do you think? Can Harry return? Not just as a royal, but as a wounded son still holding hope. Please share your perspective in the comments below. If you found this story thought-provoking, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to continue joining us in exploring the stories behind the royal spotlight. And before you leave, check out the other videos currently on your screen. You might see the royal family from a different more human angle,